There's a guy I know who did everything right. 34 years old, software engineer in Raleigh, makes $118,000 a year. He saved aggressively for 4 years, put $74,000 aside for a down payment, got pre-approved for a mortgage in January 2022, and walked into the housing market feeling like the whole thing was finally within reach. He lost 11 offers in 14 months. Cash buyers, institutional bids, offers $60,000 over asking with no inspection contingency. He eventually bought a house, $387,000, 3.1% rate, February 2022, 3 weeks before the Fed started hiking. His monthly payment came out to $1,340. Then there's a woman I know, same city, same income bracket, same savings discipline. She waited 6 months longer, trying to time the market, figured rates might drop. She finally bought in August 2023. Her house cost $362,000, cheaper on paper, but at 7.2%, her monthly payment was $2,130. She paid less for the house and more every single month for the next 30 years. That's $226,800 more in total payments on a cheaper home. And then there's a third guy I know. He bought in Phoenix in 2020 for $295,000 at 2.8%. His house is now worth $490,000, and his monthly payment is $1,094. His neighbor's identical house just sold for $487,000 with a monthly payment of $2,940. The neighbor earns more money. The third guy earns less. The third guy is functionally richer, and it's entirely because of when he got lucky. What's the pattern? The pattern is that the housing market stopped being a market in any traditional sense sometime around 2020. And the mechanics that govern it right now are so structurally broken that most of the conventional wisdom, save your down payment, get pre-approved, buy when you're ready, no longer applies the way it did for the previous generation. They all believe the same lie, that housing follows predictable cycles, that prices always eventually correct, that patience rewards buyers. The real math looks nothing like that right now. And the reasons why are not random. They are the direct result of specific decisions made by specific institutions that will benefit from you renting for the rest of your life. Here's what we're actually doing today. I'm going to show you the exact mechanism that has trapped 40 million potential homebuyers in a waiting room that leads nowhere. We'll break down the interest rate lock-in effect, a structural phenomenon that has frozen 72.3% of existing homeowners in place and cut the available supply of homes by roughly a third. I'll explain how institutional capital, specifically the $3.4 trillion in private equity real estate that entered the single-family market between 2012 and 2024, changed the rules of competition permanently. And most importantly, I'm going to give you the actual math behind 3 strategies that still work in this environment. Because doing nothing is not one of them. This isn't about whether you should buy or rent. It's about understanding which game you're actually playing so you stop making moves that belong to a different game entirely. Think of the housing market like a pipe with a valve. Water flows through the pipe. That's supply and demand, buyers and sellers, homes entering and leaving the market. The valve controls the flow. Normally, sellers open the valve when prices are good, and buyers close it when prices get too high. The system self-regulates. Here's what happened between 2020 and 2022. The Federal Reserve dropped rates to 2.65%, the lowest in American history, and an entire generation of homeowners refinanced into mortgages they will never willingly give up. Those mortgages are now sealed inside the pipe like concrete. The valve is stuck. Sellers who would have sold, the couple downsizing after the kids leave, the person relocating for a job, they're looking at a 3.1% mortgage and realizing that selling their house means buying a different house at 7.2%. Which means their monthly payment nearly doubles even if they move sideways in price. So they stay. 72.3% of outstanding mortgages in the United States right now carry an interest rate below 4%. That is roughly 50.4 million households who are financially handcuffed to their current homes. The water stopped flowing, and the pipe is now pressurized on the demand side by 4.7 million millennials entering peak home buying years annually through 2030. Supply frozen, demand growing. Prices are doing exactly what you'd expect. Now let's add the second mechanism, because the rate lock-in effect alone doesn't fully explain what happened. Starting in 2012, a wave of institutional capital, Blackstone, Invitation Homes, American Homes, For Rent, Pretium Partners, began buying single-family homes at scale in a way that had never happened before in American history. The thesis was simple. The 2008 crash had created roughly 12 million distressed properties at below-market prices. If you could buy those homes in bulk, rent them out, package them into REITs and mortgage-backed securities, You could generate consistent yield in a zero-interest rate world starving for return. By 2015, Invitation Homes alone owned 48,000 single-family houses. By 2024, that number was 84,000. American Homes 4 rent owns 59,300. Progress Residential, 87,000. The top 5 institutional landlords collectively own over 550,000 single-family homes. Now, 550,000 out of roughly 82 million owner-occupied homes sounds small, about 0.67%. Here's where it gets complicated. These companies don't distribute their buying evenly. They concentrate in specific markets: Charlotte, Atlanta, Phoenix, Tampa, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Dallas, Las Vegas, cities with warm weather, landlord-friendly regulations, and job growth. In those markets, institutional buyers represent 20% to 27% of all single-family purchases in certain zip codes. That's not a rounding error. That's a structural competitor with a balance sheet that doesn't need to sleep, doesn't feel bidding anxiety, and doesn't care if it overpays by $15,000 because it can absorb the loss across 80,000 properties. You cannot compete with that. The traditional first-time buyer is in a fistfight with a balance sheet the size of a mid-sized country's GDP. Here's what nobody told you about this part. Institutional ownership doesn't just remove homes from the for-sale market. It changes the rental market in ways that directly affect your wealth-building capacity. Invitation Homes reported average rent increases of 7.4% per year between 2020 and 2024 across its portfolio. When a company owns 84,000 homes in concentrated markets and can price them using sophisticated algorithmic yield management, the same kind of dynamic pricing airlines use, it extracts maximum rent from tenants while simultaneously justifying continued price appreciation to its investors. The result is that renting is no longer the affordable alternative that allows you to save for a down payment. In 1985, the median renter spent 27.4% of their income on housing. Today, that number is 35.1% nationally, and in markets like Miami, Los Angeles, and Austin, it's closer to 43%. If you're spending 43 cents of every dollar you earn on rent, the idea that you're going to stack $80,000 for a down payment while also building an emergency fund, contributing to your 401k, and actually living, that math doesn't work. It was never supposed to work. That's the thing. This isn't new. The mechanism is new. The intent is old. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, New York City's housing market hit a similar inflection point. Supply constrained, rents rising, working and middle-class renters getting priced out of neighborhoods they'd lived in for decades. The political response was rent control. The economic result was catastrophic. Rent control froze landlord revenue while costs kept rising, so landlords stopped maintaining properties, abandoned buildings, let entire neighborhoods deteriorate. Supply shrank further. The renters who got lucky and locked into a controlled apartment benefited enormously. Every new renter paid more. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? The people who already own win. The people trying to enter lose. The mechanism differs. This time, it's interest rate policy and institutional capital, not rent control. But the outcome is structurally identical. A bifurcated system that rewards incumbents and punishes new entrants, and which politically entrenches itself because the people who benefit are voters and the people who suffer are renters who move around and vote less consistently. There's a parallel in Japan, too. After the Japanese asset bubble collapsed in 1991, the government propped up real estate values with the same argument American policymakers use today. We can't let prices fall. Homeowners' wealth is at stake. They were right that homeowners' wealth was at stake. They were wrong that protecting that wealth was compatible with economic growth. Japan spent the next 30 years with stagnant growth, a generation of young people who couldn't afford to start families, and a housing market that didn't meaningfully correct until 2023. We're not Japan, but we are choosing the same policy, and every time we've made that choice in history, the bill gets forwarded to people who weren't in the room when it was run up. Let me show you the actual math because the numbers here are genuinely alarming. The median American home price in February 2026 is $422,800. The current 30-year fixed mortgage rate is 6.89%. A 20% down payment on a $422,800 home is $84,560. The remaining mortgage of $338,240 at 6.89% produces a monthly principal and interest payment of $2,231. Add property taxes at the national average of 1.07%, $377 per month. Homeowners insurance at roughly $150, and PMI if you put less than 20% down. Call the all-in monthly payment $2,758. Now, the median household income in America is $80,610 per year, which is $6,717 per month before taxes. After federal and state taxes, take-home is approximately $4,900 per month. Your $2,758 mortgage payment is 56.3% of your take-home income. The standard guideline for housing affordability, which no responsible lender is going to approve, is 28%. To afford this house at a 28% ratio, your take-home pay needs to be at least $9,850 per month, which means a pre-tax household income of approximately $152,000. Median household income is $80,610. The median home requires an income of $152,000. That gap, $71,390, is what we're talking about when we say the housing market is broken. And for context, in 2019, the median home required an income of $61,000 to afford comfortably. The median income was $68,700. There was positive affordability headroom. In 6 years, the calculus reversed completely. Now consider this from the renting versus buying investment angle, because this is where it gets genuinely complex and where most people make the wrong decision in both directions. Let's say you have $84,560 saved, your 20% down payment. Option A, you buy the median home, take on the $2,758 monthly payment, and build equity over time. Option B, you continue renting at, let's say, $1,900 per month, which is the national median rent for a 2-bedroom, and invest the difference. The difference between $2,758 and $1,900 is $858 per month. If you invest that $858 monthly at a 7% average annual return, which is the S&P 500's real return after inflation over 30 years according to Morningstar, you accumulate $1,034,000 in 30 years. On top of that, if you invest the original $84,560 down payment rather than putting it into a house, that single investment at 7% over 30 years becomes $643,000. Combined, the renter-investor strategy produces $1,677,000 in investable assets after 30 years, versus approximately $422,800 in home equity for the buyer assuming zero appreciation, which is obviously too conservative, but bear with me, or roughly $845,600 assuming the historical average home appreciation of 3.5% per year. On paper, the renter-investor wins by roughly $831,400 in this scenario. But here's what the math doesn't capture. The renter's rent goes up. Median rent inflation since 2010 has averaged 4.2% per year. If your $1,900 rent compounds at 4.2% annually for 30 years, by year 30, you're paying $6,890 per month in rent while your investment portfolio is also larger. But the gap between your $858 monthly investment and the actual delta closes fast. By year 15 at that rent escalation, you are likely cash flow negative relative to the homeowner who locked in a fixed payment. The homeowner's $2,758 payment doesn't move for 30 years. The renter's $1,900 payment does. This is what I call the fixed cost advantage. And it's the single most underrated factor in the buy versus rent calculation that every simplified analysis gets wrong. Meet Marcus. He's 31, makes $94,000 a year as a product manager in Charlotte, North Carolina. In 2021, he was this close to buying, had $67,000 saved, found a house for $318,000 at 3.2%. Payment would have been $1,104 a month. His fiancée wasn't sure about the neighborhood. They waited. By 2023, the same house was $389,000. At 7.1%, the payment was $2,090. They couldn't qualify. They're renting at $2,100 a month. They're spending almost exactly what the 2023 mortgage would have cost, but they're building zero equity and their rent just went up to $2,226 effective March 1st. Marcus told me he feels like he's on a treadmill. He's right. He is on a treadmill, and the machine is not slowing down. Now compare Marcus to his coworker Jamie. Jamie bought in 2020. $311,000, 2.9%, payment of $1,046 per month. His home is now worth $476,000. He has $165,000 in equity. He's not a genius. He didn't have better information. He made the same salary. The only difference between Marcus and Jamie is 18 months. 18 months separated financial liberation from indefinite purgatory. That is the morale of this specific chapter of American economic history, and I genuinely don't have an uplifting spin on it. The window existed, and it closed. Imagine you're a 28-year-old first-time buyer in 2026 sitting across from a mortgage broker. The broker runs your numbers. You earn $87,000 a year. You've saved $55,000, and you want a 3-bedroom in Atlanta. The broker pulls up a calculator. Okay, so with current rates, you can afford up to about $290,000, and I'm seeing 3 bedrooms in your target area starting at $385,000. You say, so what should I do? The broker says, well, you could look at condos. You say, I wanted a yard. I have a dog. Okay, what about a 1-bedroom? Very investable right now. I'm trying to start a family. Pause. Have you considered adjustable rate mortgages? Isn't that what caused the 2008 crisis? Long pause. Have you considered moving to Boise? And this is the actual advice the housing market has for you in 2026, Boise. Here's the thing that explains all of this underneath the math. Your brain processes housing as security before it processes it as an investment, and institutions have weaponized that emotional need in a way that traditional markets never did before. When a private equity firm buys a single-family home, it's not buying security. It's buying yield. It experiences no anxiety, no nesting instinct, no emotional ceiling on what it will pay if the risk-adjusted return still works. You do. You feel the urgency. You imagine your kids in the backyard. You walk through a house and can already see your furniture in the living room. You've been primed by every cultural signal since childhood. Your parents' home, the American dream narrative, homeownership is the baseline of responsible adulthood. To feel that not owning a home is a form of failure. Institutions feel none of this. They are playing a math game with infinite patience. You are playing an emotional game with a biological clock attached. The competition is structurally unequal in a way that has nothing to do with your effort, your discipline, or your financial intelligence. This is not a willpower problem. It's an architecture problem. Understanding that distinction is the first step to making a different kind of decision. So what do you actually do? Here's the protocol. Action step 1. Stop treating the housing decision as binary. The framework most people operate under is buy now or keep renting forever, and both options feel like losing. What I'd actually do is implement what I call the equity parallel strategy. While you're renting, take exactly what you would spend on a mortgage payment above your rent, that delta, Marcus's $858, and automate it into a low-cost total market index fund the day your rent clears. Don't touch it. You're building the financial mass that either becomes a larger down payment in 3 years or becomes a wealth-generating engine that makes you financially indifferent to whether you ever own. Vanguard's VTSAX and Fidelity's FZROX are both expense ratios below 0.04%. That is nearly free money management by historical standards. The math I showed you earlier only works if you actually invest the delta instead of letting it dissolve into lifestyle creep. Action step 2. If you're going to buy in the current environment, I'd run what I call the fixed cost floor test. Take the all-in monthly payment, mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance reserve at 1% of home value annually, and ask yourself whether this payment is sustainable on one income if something goes wrong, not 2 incomes. 1. Job loss, illness, a partner leaving. These things happen to 30% of households in any given decade according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. If the payment requires 2 incomes to work, you are one life event away from forced sale, which means you're not building equity, you're borrowing it. Most people fail this test and buy anyway. The banks will let you fail this test. They make money whether you succeed or default. You don't. Action step 3. Watch for what I call the distress inventory signal. The housing market historically unlocks supply through 3 mechanisms: job loss waves, divorce rates, and estate sales from an aging population. The United States has 73 million baby boomers. The oldest are 80, the youngest are 62. Over the next 15 years, approximately 20 to 22 million homes will transfer from boomer households through estate or downsizing sales, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association. Zillow Research refers to this as the silver tsunami. It will not hit uniformly. It will hit first in specific markets: Florida, Arizona, the Carolinas, parts of the Midwest. And when it does, it will temporarily add supply that institutional buyers cannot absorb quickly enough. Those windows will be brief, maybe 12 to 18 months in each market. The buyers who are financially ready with pre-approval in hand, down payment liquid, and a flexible timeline will capture those windows. The buyers who are trying to assemble the pieces in real time will miss them. Preparation is the only competitive advantage available to a first-time buyer in 2026. Action step 4. If you currently own, do not treat your home equity as net worth in the way most financial calculators tell you to. A metric I call the liquid wealth ratio, your investable assets divided by your total net worth including home equity, is the number that actually tells you whether you're financially flexible. If 80% or more of your net worth is trapped in home equity, you have paper wealth and cash flow constraints. You can't pay tuition with a kitchen renovation. You can't weather a job loss on drywall appreciation. The target I'd aim for is a liquid wealth ratio of at least 35% before considering yourself financially stable, meaning at least 35 cents of every dollar of your net worth should be in something you can access within 5 business days. Home equity fails that test until you sell or take a HELOC, which comes with its own cost and risk. Here are your 3 takeaways. 1. The housing market's fundamental problem is not cyclical, it is structural. The rate lock-in effect will suppress supply for another 7 to 10 years minimum unless rates drop below 5% for a sustained period, which would require an economic event serious enough that you'd have other problems. Waiting for a crash that resets the 2020 price level is not a strategy. It is wishful thinking. 2. The rent versus buy equation has inverted in approximately 45 major American markets, meaning renting and investing the delta is now mathematically superior to buying in those markets. But only if you actually invest the delta. If the delta disappears into lifestyle, you lose on both ends. The discipline to automate before you spend is the entire game. 3. If you rented through the 2020 to 2022 window and feel behind, you are not behind in life. You are behind one chapter. The people who bought in 2020 had a tailwind that was impossible to predict and impossible to manufacture. You cannot compete with luck retroactively. What you can do is structure the next decision so that your outcome depends on something you control. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes.